Thanks, Shannon. Well, if you're still here, you're not in a hurry at this point is the good news, because there's no way you're getting through Atlanta. May as well have dinner up here. I appreciate everybody staying and listening to me talk. So when Mike Davis asked me to give this talk, and I asked him, what do you have in mind exactly? I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about at Tallulah, and he said, well, give kind of the background on Tallulah, and so I got that coming up. And then he said, talk about some of the lessons that you learned in Tallulah. And Tallulah is definitely a teacher. It's a tough place to burn. I can't think of many places that are much harder to burn in terms of just the topography but also in terms of the social dynamics and the ecology that come with this landscape. And so rather than stand up here like some old guy, I've got a couple years. Well, I'm going in my 27th year now with DNR, so I'll be able to retire in a few months if I want to. Rather than standing here and giving you a bunch of lessons to take home, I'd rather let the place do the teaching for me. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of the lessons that I've learned, kind of through the stories of some of the issues that we've had that we run into and struggled with, and hopefully are overcoming. And you guys can maybe get some takeaways from that. And Tallulah can be the teacher more so than me. So I think, we all probably come to fire with a different origin story. Probably a lot of you maybe started out burning with family. You grew up in a place that just your dad burned, your grandpa burned, and now you burn. I wasn't one of those people. Some people come, to it from a wildlife background. Maybe they wanted to get a huntable quail population, or they burned for their deer population or something like that. And that wasn't really the origins of Tallulah either. It's kind of a surprising start, actually. For me, the interest in Tallulah all started with the big southern pine beetle outbreak that happened around 2000. And there's definitely a teaching lesson in this one, I think. So the southern pine beetle outbreak, a lot of people probably weren't here for it. Maybe a lot of you don't remember. Who here was actually a professional during this time up here in North Georgia and had to deal with it? Yeah, I see like 3 or 4, maybe a dozen hands. It was huge. It was a terrible outbreak of southern pine beetle. It got its start over near Calhoun, basically around the Bowater plant. And Bowater was doing something that probably in hindsight wasn't that smart. They were pushing forestry to the limits of what it could do, trying to grow pulpwood. And they were growing loblolly, north of 800 stems per acre, unthinned, and then just clear cutting it, 18, 20 years old and starting over again. And really anybody with a forestry background can tell you that's just a recipe for southern pine beetle outbreak. And pine beetle is cyclic, it's native. We were due to have a southern pine beetle outbreak. But I think Bowater threw some gasoline on that outbreak. And what we got spread, it started out in southeast Tennessee. It spread through northern Georgia, through western South Carolina, western North Carolina. In Georgia, it's hard to get any real estimates on acres, because a lot of what happened was we lost a tree here or there. The stand wasn't lost. It might have been a mixed pine hardwood stand, but we lost most of the pine in it. And so the acreage estimates aren't out there. But in Georgia, they think we lost about $81 million worth of timber. That's probably mostly just the plantations, not the stuff that happened up on the ridges in the mountains where we are now. I was here for it. Maybe some of you who are here for it have a different number, but I'm going to say that we lost about 85% of our old pitch pine and table mountain pine in that one outbreak in those 3-year period. And it's something that really hurt my heart. I really care about the Southern Appalachians. I did my graduate work on the southern districts of the Cherokee National Forest. And to me, it was really something sad to see. And the Chattahoochee lost a lot of its old pines, and they're up there on the 2,000 to 4,000 foot elevation ridges, and those places aren't the same anymore. Those pine stands are not even a memory for most people, and they've been forgotten. And today those stands are red maple, sourwood, maybe some scarlet oak. We lost something, and it was something beautiful. Places like Linville Gorge, Tallulah Gorge, those are really to me the epicenters of where these pitch pine, table mountain pine communities are the most striking and the most beautiful, and they're very inspirational. They're the sort of thing that inspires art, the sort of thing that just makes you glad to be able to enjoy, to be out in. And Tallulah Gorge is one of those places. And we definitely lost most of our table mount pine, pitch pine during that outbreak. But it was already changing. This was a landscape that had already been changing from 100 years of fire suppression. And it's a landscape that this change, much like how it's not going to be too much longer, this outbreak of southern pine beetle around 2000 won't even be remembered. The landscape that was Tallulah Gorge is something that is not remembered. The landscape that we know and love, the landscape that today's people cherish, that is Tallulah Gorge, is very different from what was there. And it happens slowly enough. We're a pretty short-lived species, really, when it comes to landscape level change. A lifetime isn't really that long. This slow change goes unnoticed. So what had happened, I think a lot of people in this room understand it already. We have a couple species that are the drivers of the ecosystem that are to some degree serotinous, so their cones need fire to open. And about 100 years of a very infrequent fire, most of the time the cones weren't opening, the seed wasn't hitting the ground at the right time of year. On top of that, we had this mass of duff that was slowly accumulating over the decades. And you need mineral soil for most southern yellow pines to regenerate. And so this duff was essentially excluding the possibility of any recruitment of this community. And so the picture all the way on the right is what we had. We had, before this big outbreak, these scattered old growth, beautiful pitch pine, table mountain pine, shortleaf pine, old trees with no young trees around them, with a whole lot of hardwoods coming up underneath them. And then 2000 came along and we lost all those old trees, or most of those old trees. And so that gives us the landscape that we love today on Tallulah Gorge, which is just a shadow of what it was. What was it? There's some interesting things that are starting to come to light. Here's a postcard from 1910 of that same view. What do you see here? It's really different from the picture that I just went by. So what I see is that it's a pine-dominated landscape. It's not hardwood, it's pine. And it's open. There are huge openings. And you can imagine, the artist didn't get into a lot of detail on these openings, but there are huge areas along the rim that were treeless. What was in there? Probably heaths, grass, younger pines, some recruitment. So look, I'm going to flip back and forth one more time. Take a mental snapshot of this image, and now look at that and see the difference. A lot has changed. This is a hardwood forest. Why does it matter? Well, Tallulah Gorge is a real hotbed of rare species. These are just a few. There's a lot more. All sorts of rare plants, including orchids, parasitic plants like sweet pine snout that need pine communities, all kinds of cryptic species that most of us would never recognize, different sedges and rushes and things that only botanists can geek out on, and a lot of rare animals too, that some of which need these pine communities, need these open habitats to hunt in. Furthermore, there's actually whole communities on Tallulah Gorge that are imperiled and vulnerable to extinction according to NatureServe, and these are the fire-dependent pine communities. These aren't the chestnut oak communities, these aren't the sourwood communities, these are the pine communities that are vulnerable, that need conservation. There's actually some communities that are new to science. So just this past year, we got a description of a new community type. It's an Appalachian, it's the bottom one there, Southern Appalachian woodland that's had the understory is dominated by Appalachian hill cane. Appalachian hill cane is a third species of bamboo, essentially a small native bamboo. It was only described as a new species about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Now it has its own community type, and the only places it's known from is Tallulah Gorge. It hasn't even been ranked yet. It's so new. They haven't decided yet, is it imperiled? Is it vulnerable to extinction? Well, it's only known from Tallulah Gorge, so it's probably imperiled at least. Here's what it looks like. It's really a fascinating dynamic. So when we're burning in these places, even when there's a mild fire, we get a lot of tree mortality in these patches. And you'll hear a lot more about tree mortality in a minute. But these are places where, just a 2 to 3 foot flame length fire goes through, and we end up losing a lot of our overstory. And this cane, this Appalachian hill cane, must just be a monster underground. And as best I can tell, it's out competing. There's underground competition with roots going on, and these trees are so stressed from that competition that the cane, just with a little bit of a nudge, pushes those trees out, and it turns into these big open cane breaks on top of the ridges. It's a really unique community, and we don't know much about it yet because it was just described this year. Well, anyway, I saw this happen. I saw us lose all these yellow pine communities that really mattered to me personally, and to a lot of us, they matter a lot. And I wanted to do something about it where I could. And I was a state employee. I was pretty new, probably a little foolish, pretty new to fire, probably definitely out of my depth when it comes to burning and taking on Tallulah Gorge. But fortunately, I had a lot of friends, a lot of partners that helped me through, kept me out of trouble for the most part. And so in 2006, we started burning, and this is the North Rim. And we've been trying for a 4-year rotation. These are our burn units. We've basically broken them down into two units. So we're doing pretty well with the ballpark of a 3-year rotation. We've got the North Rim up here, the Park Visitor Center, if you've been there, is up here. And this is the Stone Place Road or Stone Place Hiking Trail, if you've been hiking out there. So you've been hiking out there in the last few years, you've seen the burn. And then this is the south end down here. And you can see we're surrounded by natural forest on either side. So we've got a really great landscape to do some burning in. We've got a lot of partners. Forest Service has been probably one of the most important ones. They show up in mass. They have helped us on every burn. We couldn't have done it without them. They've been a huge source of encouragement and manpower and equipment and anyway, but also the Georgia Forestry Commission, the Nature Conservancy. They've been at every burn. Georgia State Parks. And Georgia Power. One of the interesting things about these units is that let's see, I think the north unit's about 1,300 acres and the south unit's about 800 acres. And for both of those units combined, we only have about 300 yards of plowed break. So it's definitely, I guess this is one of the lessons, not to put it out there so bluntly, but when you step back and you burn on a landscape level, you can do a lot of good without nearly the expense or the holding issues or the safety concerns that come with holding a lot of rugged line. On Tallulah Gorge, it wasn't so much that I was smart about this, it was that there weren't any other choices. If you've been to Tallulah, you can imagine. I mean, there's only two classes of land out there. It's either steep or it's a cliff. And so there aren't a lot of places where you can break it out. And so we used roads and we used creeks and we used lakes, and that was it. So anyway, that's something I'm proud of, that we get so many acres with so little plowing. And so we're smart enough to know that we couldn't head fire the steep ground. And so the first time we burned it, the strategy was, let's just pepper the heck out of this place. Let's put so many balls down in that canyon that the fire doesn't ever get a chance to get running. And it'll be a pretty calm fire, right? It's only going to run for, I don't know, 50, 60 feet before it runs into another fire and won't get a chance to build anything. And that didn't work. We got a lot of flack. We scorched a lot of trees. I scorched a lot of trees. We got a lot of tree mortality. And so Georgia Power was really concerned about that. We had a meeting about it. We've had several meetings about this issue over the years. It seems to keep coming back over and over again, and we're still dealing with this issue. So Georgia Power's idea was, well, I tell you what, rather than putting any fire in the gorge, just light the rim, light the top, and let it back into the gorge. See what that does. So we did. And here's a quick video. Sorry for the bouncy. This is me in a helicopter, but this is the North Rim. And so we just lit the rim, and you can see there's these fingers of fire that are working their way down. It's not backing as one big line. It's these different fingers that are backing into the gorge. Yeah, it's a little hot in places, but it's, you can see on some of those ridges, it's getting a little hot, but it's not tree killing hot. Seemed like it might work. It did. So what happened? What went wrong with this idea? I mentioned those fingers. So if you have hours to sit and watch them, which when you're running the burn, you don't. So I had to put a time-lapse camera on it the next time to figure out what's going on. But you get these fingers of fire that back down into the gorge. And down in the ravines, there's these gaps where the fire's moving more slowly. But what do you think happens when you get down canyon wind? This fire backs down and crosses that gully and runs up the other side and slams into the fire up here. And the whole way up that ridge is crowning trees, torching trees, killing trees. Didn't see that one coming. Whoops. Let me see if I can get caught up here. So after we've done this for a few years, actually probably by the second year or so, this is what Tallulah Gorge. Look. This is the north burn unit up in here. And you can see that these big bare patches of tree mortality. Where, this one back down in the Marana. And so over the years we've accumulated these bare patches. Not really what our objective was. It's very visible. The aesthetics, I don't know. We'll see. But it wasn't really what we're going for. We were hoping to just sort of gently put fire back into this landscape, and that's not what was happening in spite of our best efforts. Our friend Philip Juris, probably a lot of you guys have had a chance to peruse his art. It's amazing stuff. He's been out on some of these burns. He actually was out in one of them where we're burning, and he captured some of that fun action. And I mean, he definitely has a different sense of the aesthetic than maybe some people do, but you can see the beauty in it right here. One of the other beautiful things about fires like this, although it's a little bit of a two-edged sword, is that the fire's backing into this canyon all night long. One of the prettiest things I've ever seen is to go up to the edge of the canyon when this is going on, and before you can even look down into it, the whole canyon just glowing orange. It's like a pot of molten gold. And to watch that fire is one of the more peaceful things you can see. Here's another one of Philip Juris's paintings of that one of those scars up there up top. And so, we've had to struggle with this. Our fire program has been criticized a lot. We've probably made some of the neighbors uncomfortable. We've made some of our partners uncomfortable. And in spite of us trying to dial down this fire behavior, it fights us every step of the way. And so you really got to ask yourself, well, what's this place supposed to look like? How do you get it back to that postcard picture? Why can't we get what we want? Well, one of the interesting things that came along the way was this other painting. So our colleague and my friend, Tom Patrick, he was always working in Tallulah Gorge. We lost him a few years back. And in the process of going through his files, they came across this. And this is a painting from the 1840s of Tallulah Gorge, that same area, the North Rim on the right side of that painting. And one of the interesting things in this painting is that there's this huge bald patch exactly where our bald patches are. And if you look closely, I don't know if the resolution is good enough, you can see broken off tree stumps in it. I mean, that was a patch of mortality in the 1840s. So it really makes you wonder, what does good fire look like? We like to preach a lot about good fire, and I think we all have a different idea about it. And for a lot of us, it's a 2 to 3 foot fire backing through, or maybe head firing through or whatever, but it's not getting big. It's not hurting anything. It's not radically changing a landscape. But if your fire program is taking a landscape back to what it looked like before fire suppression, is that good fire? So we don't know. We're still working through it. If anybody's got a better idea on how to calm the fire down on Tallulah Gorge, I'm all ears. All right, here's another issue that's come up. It's definitely another teachable moment. A lot of lessons in it for me, for sure. So this is the South Rim now. This is the problem on the South Rim. Each unit is completely different, kind of have their own personalities and their own problems. Kind of like children, although I'm not a parent. The problem is we kept getting fire that would go all the way down into these ravines and bump the creeks a lot of times. And okay, maybe that's what it's supposed to happen. I mean, it's backing down through rhododendron, what's it hurting, The problem is that we've got a federally endangered plant that lives down there. It's a persistent trillium. It's endemic just to Tallulah Gorge and a little bit of the environment around there. And, you burn through there. We were burning typically right after it emerges, and we're top killing it. Surely that can't be good for an endangered plant. So over the years, we kept trying to let the fire find its own head and try to backfire down into these gorges just as gently as we could. Sometimes last time we burned the South Rim was last year. We just lit off the ridge. Actually, RT was the one that was doing it with his drone, lit off the ridges. It must have been 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon when we finally gave you the go ahead to light off those ridges. And so the idea being that it would back down the hill and go out. Hopefully when dark came, it didn't. It burned all through the night. So Tom was okay with that. You know, we put in some monitoring, and we're trying to make sure the trilliums are doing okay. And on Moody Branch, you know, I'd collected the data, I hadn't really analyzed it. And after we lost Tom, Lisa Cruz came along, and she got her botanist Carly to go out and rerun these surveys that were done for trillium on Tallulah. And so they were run in 1984 by Georgia Power's Jim Candler, and in 21 and 22 by Carly Stepping. And you can see this downward line, right? So this is a federally native plant. And here's what we had before Nathan came on and started burning the gorge. And here we've lost about half the population after Nathan started burning. Yikes. Turns out it's not quite that simple. It's actually a lot more complicated. So I've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to try and set it up. But here's one thing that's interesting. That is that the green are populations of trillium where we're not burning. So Panther Creek lost most of its population. Moccasin Creek actually doubled. Well, actually, it almost doubled. Moody Branch, we burned. Black Branch, here's one of the branches of Black Branch. Anyway, there's not a clear pattern related to fire. Some of these populations that aren't getting burned are crashing just as bad as the places where we are burning. Some of the places that we're burning are doing a lot better than places that aren't getting fire. Kind of confusing. So I also had this data set where I GPS where the fire engine was. So in 2008, I walked, hit my right boot in the black and the black and the left boot in the green. And this is Moody Branch right here. So we burned up here, down here, didn't burn. Did the same thing every time we burned. We also collected data on where all the trilliums were. So now I know how many times did that plant get burned. It got burned, looks like one time. You know, up here, they got burned 3 times. So you can start to try to figure out what's going on in relation to fire. So here's a density graph of the same data. Those are the trilliums. And you can see there's really 2 core areas where all the trilliums are. Here it is in 2022. We actually had a huge increase in the branch between 2013 and 2022. So that also is different from this data. What happens if we put 2013, which is somewhere in here, into this graph? Changes the whole picture. So here's Nathan showed up and started burning here. We didn't collect data until 2013. So here's the fire program. Here's the fire suppression. Suddenly it looks like this trillium might actually benefit from fire, which is a heck of a lot easier, a lot easier for people to support on the fire program. So you can see it's moving downhill. Here's 2013, here's 2022. And so kind of wrapping it up here, think about what's happening. So this is Moody Branch, this is Black Branch. These are our 2 biggest trillium populations. Think about maybe in the 1800s, back when that open landscape was still here. And imagine this purple is essentially rhododendron. Too dark for trillium. They're not down in that rhododendron. They're on right here on the edge. And where the rhododendron was kind of sparse, maybe. And they're all, the trillium don't want to be up here where it's high and dry and full of short leaf and pitch pine. Go through 100 years of fire suppression, and the rhododendron thickens up, and it excludes trillium from a lot of its habitats and pushes it uphill. Put fire back in, and it starts moving back down again. So here's the 2013 population. Here's the 2022 population. That's what's going on. The heats are shifting downhill, and the trilliums are chasing after it, which is kind of cool. And it turns out our keynote speaker at the Fire Learning Network a couple of weeks ago, Charles Lapon, he actually published a paper recently about this shrub expansion of heaths in these areas. So it's something that's been known, although we didn't realize what it was doing to trilliums. All right, so here's some of those lessons that I promised you not to just rattle off in a boring manner, but I think these are some of the things that hopefully there are take homes from some of these experiences I've had at Tallulah. I don't need to necessarily read them off. I'll try to hit the highlights maybe, but you know, if you're going to start a fire program, expect some complications. And know there's always going to be a good reason not to burn, and you're going to have to push through that. You're going to have to figure out workarounds. You're going to have to plan for resiliency. You're going to have to make ambitious plans, because a lot of times you're not going to be able to accomplish everything. But if you aim high, hopefully you're going to still hit the mark. Probably the most important thing on here is to make a lot of friends. None of this would have been possible without, you know, folks like Shan and Mike Davis and Phil Delastres and Michael Wood, and so many other people who helped over the years to get Tallulah Gorge burned. So Tallulah Gorge is one hell of a teacher, I can tell you that much. And I hope to be able to burn it a few more times before I retire. That's all I got.